If you're into your cool four-wheel drives, so they don't get a whole lot cooler than this thing. It's the Ford Bronco Raptor. We have come to the other side of the world, well, almost the other side of the world, Dubai, up into some mountains. We're away from the sand dunes, testing this thing out, hopefully going to have a bit of fun. First though, some background. Now the Bronco shares its architecture with the Ford Everest, which also shares its architecture with the Ford Ranger. But whereas those two are a little bit sensible, obviously high volume cars, this one is a bit retro, a bit fun, a bit cool looking. It's as much about turning heads as it is about the substance. But today it's the substance that we want to put to the ultimate test. No prizes for guessing that the Bronco Raptor shares a lot of its DNA with the Ranger Raptor. And it starts up here with a 3-litre V6 twin-turbo engine. Also, the wheels and tyres, much bigger, obviously heavy-duty off-road tyres there. And the suspension, well, it's semi-active suspension, Fox suspension, so really serious stuff. A lot of pretty full-on software going on under there to make it sort of control the car and deal with those big hits. And it's got this other fancy thing called sway bar disconnect, which we're going to put to the test out here. But there's one big difference between Ranger and Bronco. Everything in this car has been dialed up. So the engine's got a fraction more power. The tyres, they are a whole lot bigger. The shock absorbers, they're thicker. They're designed to do more heavy duty stuff. There's a lot more suspension travel and it's got shorter overhangs front and rear. So it's designed to do a lot more of this hardcore off-roading. And inside too, there's plenty of coolness. Now, just like the exterior, there's a bit of a retro flavour to it. It's sort of got that utilitarian workhorse sort of feel about it. And things in here look like they're designed to work well off-road. So you've got proper physical buttons to do things like the sway bar disconnect, your diff locks, auxiliary switches on the roof. And we've got some pretty cool stuff, a little bit of race car thinking going on. So as well as obviously the Bronco logo on the steering wheel, we've got carbon fibre, some nice carbon fibre touches around the joint, paddle shifters, digital instrument cluster, huge centre screen there, and some pretty cool colours too. So you've got some red stitching, some blue trim finishes. It looks pretty cool. Now clearly this car is designed to do some really serious, really hardcore off-roading, but also on this stuff, on this faster flowing gravel where you've got some, some rocks, some corrugations, some dips and thumps. It does a really cool job, and again you can feel that stance, the wider footprint of it really working hard here. And also over those bumps, sometimes you hit sort of a little ridge in the road or something that ordinarily would throw a car out a fair bit. This one just sort of lands. It's almost like a spider falling off a table or something. It just sort of controls it, sorts it all out, and away you go. You feel like you could carry a fair bit of pace into some of these bumps. Like that one. You're never short of grunt either. Obviously in Australia, with our off-roaders, we tend to go for diesel, but this thing not only has the top end power when you need it, you can floor it and rev it out, but it's also got heaps of that meaty mid-range that makes all this sort of stuff that much easier. When you want the extra grunt, you got it. We're looking at some pretty full-on, pretty gnarly rocks here. It doesn't take long behind the wheel to realise that this thing is pretty capable, and you're going to be doing a whole bunch of this stuff very, very easily. Where it really helps, those tyres, they're obviously a massive part of it, having that much chunkiness to the tread and not having to worry about punctures, absolutely brilliant. But also that wide stance, you can feel it really keeping it fairly planted, fairly stable on this stuff. It's pretty cool. I've got the forward-facing camera here, so when I'm coming up to these big peaks, all of a sudden you can get an idea of what's going on the other side. A little touch there, but a fair bit of steel and other stuff underneath to try and look after all the vitals. And this thing obviously has an enormous amount of ground clearance, massive in terms of how much you got there. Even over these sorts of bumps, you can feel that suspension really working. So the dampers have amazing control. They're designed obviously to work at high speeds, to control the car when you're coming off a big jump, a big bump, whatever it might be. But even on this stuff, you can feel that they're doing a really nice job of just keeping it settled and keeping it really nicely planted. On road, the Bronco Raptor is almost as wild. That soft suspension means it leans and lurches in corners. Get too aggressive with the steering wheel on a freeway and it's a wild old ride. In some ways though, that adds to the character. It is not your typical performance machine, but is instead something that makes you work for it. Now, despite the shared DNA, the Ranger and the Bronco have completely different personalities. You get that as soon as you step on the throttle. So floor it, and this thing's got a sort of more highly strung, a raspier exhaust sound to it, so it feels a bit more purposeful. You're also getting more noise off those tyres. So those huge 37-inch tyres, you can hear them. They're certainly making a noise. We're sitting on about 100 k's an hour. So yeah, from that perspective, you're looking at more. And it's also got a whole lot more going on from a design perspective, and you get that looking out from here. Big sort of bulges on the bonnet, a lot of air intakes and fins and all sorts of stuff. So looks pretty cool. No qualms with the engine. That 3-litre V6 works beautifully, not only providing the sort of thrust that makes things exciting, but also sounding great as you rev it out. And a 10-speed auto with closely spaced ratios keeps the engine in its sweet spot. And now for some bad news. Will the Bronco Raptor come to Australia? Highly unlikely, and it all comes down to the numbers. You see, in the States, this car sells for about $90,000 US. Now, you convert that to Aussie dollars, you're looking at maybe 140, 150, and of course the steering wheel is on the left-hand side, so it needs to be converted to right-hand drive. So let's call it 20 odd grand for that process. But the big clincher, the killer for this car, is a thing called luxury car tax. Now, pickup trucks in Australia, they don't pay that luxury car tax, SUVs do. So all of a sudden you've got another 33% on a big chunk of the price of the car as an additional tax onto everything else. So suddenly you're looking at, I don't know, 200, 250 grand. Are people going to go paying $250,000 for what is an extremely cool, extremely capable toy? I'm not so sure. Certainly not the masses. It's a shame because there's so much to like with the Bronco Raptor, and there's nothing like it on the road today. One of the reasons there's so much interest in this car. Maybe next time.